Hey guys, what's up? It's DJ Unprotected. Recently started a group up with my friend James. We're called the Freaqz, and here is a track that we were working on, so check it out. So I'm going to show you what I did to get more out of my my rough, grindy bass sound that we have throughout the verses in this track. Here's what the verse bass, or here's what the synth sound like by itself. Okay, so I mean, it sounds pretty good. I've applied, EQ and compression techniques to the signal, but I want a little bit more out of it. I want it to sound a little bit more full. Okay, so the first thing that you would do is you would right click on your channel and click create parallel channel, and this is the technique that you would use to do either parallel compression or just parallel processing in general. Now in this case I did a little bit of both. So for the first part, here's what it sounds like. It sounds, as you can hear, it sounds real thin, and has, it's a little bit wide thanks to this unison plugin. And I'll show you here are the settings that I use for a lot of my parallel processing. A very high ratio in this case, because I really want to squash the signal, was 22:1. Threshold was very low. Really want to squash it. Didn't want anything up past a certain point. And then a release, I usually start around 750 milliseconds. And then of course a fast attack. And so those were the settings I used. Now you can see in the chain I did the dynamics. So I wanted this compression to apply first in the signal flow. I didn't use any EQ here, and then went to insert. So this compression piece first, right, to really squash the signal, and then we would come down here, and so that way we can apply our effects to it. So the first thing you do is anytime you're doing parallel compression, it's going to build up a lot of low end, and I use this Black Knight 5-band equalizer. It was definitely an EQ that I used throughout this mix. I recently purchased it off of Propeller Heads, rack extensions. I actually really like this rack extension a lot. I'm going to do a video on a review and how I applied it to my mixing techniques, but I really do like it. So this is just with the EQ by itself, and I really took out a lot of it. As you can see here, we're at about 700 hertz, so everything below that is going to be cut down significantly. Then I wanted to add a unison to kind of widen the signal a little bit, because the original is just straight in the center because it wasn't cut so low, and so we wanted this to kind of spread out amongst the speakers a bit, add a little bit more energy. So this is what it sounds with the unison added. Okay, and then the final piece was I added the M-Class equalizer here just to take a bit out the top, and I think it was around 4 kilohertz. It was real rough around this end. I'll play it to you with and without it on, but I didn't want it competing with the lead bass synth or the vocal samples that you heard in the original piece. So here is what it sounds like. Okay, so the next piece would be, after applying this parallel processing channel, we're going to add one more. So how this sequence works in Reason is you would build a parallel channel off of your main channel, and then you build another parallel channel off of this new creation. I've already done it, so it's grayed out. And I wanted to add a little bit more sharpness to that sound, but to kind of pan it onto another speaker. So here's what it sounds like. Okay, so as you can kind of hear there, it sounds like, you know, it's got a little bit of a phasing sound to it. And I use this Audiomatic rack extension. I think it's an awesome plugin. I use it a lot on my synths. In this case, it really helped add, it makes it, you know, some movement to it, adds a little bit of brightness to the signal. So I'll play it to you with and without. Finally took out around that same frequency range, around 4 kilohertz, took out about 6 dBs or so. And so here's it with all the processing within itself. Okay, so the next step in this process is going to be mixing to taste, and that's kind of where this EQ and this EQ came from, but it's really about volume level. So if I turn all these up, it's gonna seem kind of loud, right? So we're gonna, you know, put all these together. Now when you're doing parallel processing, what I recommend is pulling both of those faders all the way down, letting the signal play, and bringing this up, bringing the fader up until you can just barely hear it. Then pull it back down a little bit. Then you mute it to see if you miss it, and then you unmute it to make sure that it's back in there appropriately, because it's not to overpower, it's just to add a little bit more weight and depth to the signal. So here's how I'll do it. Remember, when you do this, the idea is that less is more. And by that, I mean the more you add, the less space you end up having to mess around with your other instruments. The less you have of the processing of individual instruments means the more room you have to work on the other elements. So I hope you understand that concept, because that's very important in parallel processing and parallel compression. You don't need a lot of this stuff in the mix, and I could probably even pull these down another dB or two. So again, here it is in context. Alright everyone, that completes this tutorial on making your synths or sounds bigger and getting more out of them using parallel processing and parallel compression. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll post a link again here for the original, the Freaqz track that we completed, so you can hear all the elements we composed and produced and mixed and mastered that whole track within Reason itself. So if you have any questions, let me know, and stay tuned, subscribe, because I'll be posting more videos as we continue to work on projects. So as always, play it loud, have fun, peace.